We are in a study on the life of Jesus, looking at Jesus as a leader. I'm calling it Leading Like Jesus. And we've looked at different aspects, how that he led his disciples, his followers. Tonight I want to address the discipline of Jesus. And we're going to use for our text, Mark the 9th chapter, verses 33 through 37. It says, then he, speaking of Jesus, came to Capernaum, and that was where his ministry was based, his headquarters, so to speak. He came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, that's a key phrase there, he asked them, what was it that you disputed among yourselves on the road? But they kept silent, for on the road they had disputed among themselves who would be the greatest. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And he sat down and called the 12 and said unto them, if anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. Then he took a little child and set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken him up in his arms, he said to them, whoever receives one of these little children in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me. What an interesting passage of Scripture, and it is a classic picture of human nature, the way that we relate to one another. So many times we misunderstand that because we are Christians that we're no longer people. That's just not true. No. In any kind of relationships, there are going to be conflicts, particularly when you start dealing with leaders, and these are 12 leaders that Jesus is training. He's picked them out to be his apostles so he can train them. They're with him. Then he's going to send them out. And when you start dealing with leaders, leaders tend to be quite aggressive, and they tend to be very territorial. So even Jesus had to deal with this, that there's conflicts among his disciples, among his followers. And if that is true concerning Christ, it is certainly true concerning you and I and our churches and the relationships that we have with people. Now, one of the first things that I want to emphasize is that disagreements are not a sign of failure. Most people do not really enjoy being in a fight. I think there are some people that do because they're always stirring up something, but thank God that's not the majority of people. The majority of people, they would rather have a peaceful atmosphere. But we must understand disagreements are not a sign of failure. A wise statement I heard many years ago simply said, if there's two people that agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary. There's some truth in that. We learn from each other and from different points of view. See, failure comes when we do not address the disagreement and correct the relationship. That's where the failure comes from. Not because we had a different viewpoint, not because we didn't agree, but we became disagreeable. There's a big difference there. Now, what good leadership does, good leadership creates an atmosphere of stability, or in other words, it's a safe place where we can express our differences of opinion, but we are still friends, and we walk out of the room still friends, even though we may disagree upon that. See, we're dealing with relationships here, and a relationship that has not endured conflict is superficial. It's just surface only. A relationship that hasn't endured challenge is very shallow. A relationship that hasn't experienced crisis, it's unproven and unreliable. So in every relationship, there will be conflict. It's like one of my friends that referred to his wife as being his beloved enemy, because of their differences of viewpoint. But if husbands and wives can overcome their differences, then we can do the same. Now, there's three main words that I want to focus on with the life of Christ, that how he dealt with conflict and how he was able to resolve it and move them forward to something that was productive and make progress. The first word is the word confront. Confront. The defense of the weak is always a test of good leadership. That's a very important statement, because I have observed this in my travels around the world, that if you really want to know what a culture, what a people, what a religion really believes, look at the way they treat women and children. In other words, those that cannot defend themselves. And when you see the way that they're treated, you will know the heart of that culture or that religion. So good leaders, good secure leaders, always come to the defense of those that cannot protect themselves, or the innocents, the people that are not able to fight back. Good leaders always take up their case and always defend them, providing a safe atmosphere for everyone. Jesus was very quick to confront. Now, that's different than what I've seen today. I see a lot of leaders, they try to avoid all confrontation. First of all, that's an exercise in futility. It's impossible. There's going to be offenses. There's going to be conflicts. Good leadership deals with those conflicts. You must be willing to confront them. For instance, a classic example of this is in John the 12th chapter, where Jesus is on his way to the cross. He knows what's going to happen. He's going to be betrayed. He's going to be crucified. As the disciples are gathered together, there's a woman that steps into the room, and she takes an alabaster box, a bottle of very costly perfume, worth a whole year's wages, and she pours it on his feet and anoints his feet, and the disciples start murmuring, complaining, and why this waste? And Jesus was very, very loving, but very firm, maybe even stern. The words that he said were, "Leave her alone." Boy, you can tell that they have got on the wrong side here. And they shut that kind of talking up real quick. Now, that's what a good leader has to do. He takes the defense of those that cannot defend themselves. There are so many leaders that they think if we ignore the conflict, it will go away. No. It will not go away. It will come back, only it will be bigger the next time. And you'll be dealing with a bigger problem, with greater anger. So Jesus doesn't ignore it. He challenges it directly, like in this case, he says, "Leave her alone." They could hear the tenor in his voice. They could hear those words that he was saying. He meant business, and they shut up, which is exactly what should have happened. So just ignoring a conflict does not make it go away. You must be willing to confront. And if you're not willing to do that, you will never be a good leader. It's impossible. But notice, and it's the reason I pointed out this phrase, when he was come into the house. Notice Jesus does not do this publicly. He waits until they are in a private setting in the house, and then he deals with this conflict. They're disputing among themselves who's going to be the greatest, who's going to get to sit next to Jesus on their throne. And that was the thing that's consuming them. And so Jesus doesn't deal with it in a public setting. He waits until they are in the house. That's wisdom. And a good leader will look for those opportunities. Now, there's a verse of scripture found in the book of 1 Timothy 5:20 that's key to this, where he says, "The person that is sinning, rebuke before all, that they may learn from the discipline." Now, here's what I note from this passage. First of all, this verse is addressed to church leadership. It's not talking about the members here. He's talking to church leaders. And he's saying to those that are in leadership, here's what you've got to do to deal with those that are practicing sin. The principle is, if it's private, keep it private. Don't spread it around. Private sin should be dealt with privately. But public sin, it has to be addressed publicly. There is no other way for good leadership. You have to address this. Now, there's a principle that I heard this several years ago, and I've tried to live by it. If people are not a part of the solution, then don't make them a part of the problem. Those are wise words. Let me repeat that. If people are not a part of the solution, then don't make them a part of the problem. That's where husbands and wives ought to keep their disagreements private. Do your discussion, when you're alone, not in front of the kids. No, because you're bringing them into something. You are supposed to be protecting them and providing a safe atmosphere. It's not good leadership for you to take private matters and make it public. And the same is true with the church. In the book of Matthew, the 18th chapter, where Jesus talks about if somebody has done you wrong, then go to him and try to straighten it out. If you can't, take one or two more. Notice you're keeping it very limited here, just a small group that knows about it. And if they will not listen to you and them, then tell it to the church, take it to the church. But he's not talking about the church membership. No, he's talking about church leadership. And the church leaders should deal with this. You don't take adult problems and dump them on the children. And so this is the way that Jesus dealt with it. He confronted it very quickly. The second word that I see with the way that Jesus dealt with discipline is correction. The word correction. See, the truth is, none of us are perfect. Only Jesus was perfect. None of the rest of us are perfect. All team members, all church members, all church leaders are going to make a mistake. In fact, if you don't make any mistakes, you don't do anything else either. Because we're not perfect. And one of the ways we learn is through some of the mistakes that we make. Now, here's the thing that we must do, though. The actions of the people that are following affect our ministry. They reflect on us as a leader. And it's one of the reasons that you must, as a leader, confront and correct the problems. Jesus was very quick to defend his disciples, but he also was very quick to correct them. Now, both words are important. He would defend them, but he also corrected them. He assumed what we would call responsibility for his ministry team. And the Pharisees would come, why do your disciples do this? Why do your disciples do? And Jesus was quick to defend them, but when they did wrong, he was quick to correct them. See, if we take responsibility, if we defend them, we must also hold them accountable. It's very important. Jesus held them accountable because the actions of the team, they either build or they destroy the influence of that church or that ministry. If your children, for instance, are acting up, guess who's going to get blamed for it? Yes, the parents will get blamed for it because they're supposed to be the leader. So if you're going to take responsibility, you must be willing to correct them when they've done wrong. Otherwise, it's going to come back on you. Because defending them without correcting them, it leaves the leader to be blamed if the problem reoccurs, if it happens again. So what good leaders do, good leaders turn problems into lessons learned. They're always taking every situation in life and saying, what can we learn from this? How can we improve this? As someone has said, the biggest room in the whole world is the room for improvement. And that is so true. So don't waste your time, on these teachable moments. A very humorous story that I think of many years ago when our youngest daughter, Carrie, she was just a little toddler, probably about a year and a half, 2 years old, just getting around good and talking well. And she came wanting to help me address the Christmas cards, and we're putting our name stickers on because there's hundreds of cards we were mailing out, and I didn't want to write my name on all of them, so she wants to help. So I give her a piece of paper and some stickers that she can stick on. No, she doesn't want to stick the stickers on the paper. She wants to put them on the chairs. She wants to put them on the refrigerator, this. And so I try to correct her, and she crawls under the table. Well, I know why she's crawled under the table, so I can't see what she's doing. And she's sticking the stickers on something else that she shouldn't be doing. And so I think this is a good teachable moment. And so I said to her, Carrie, I know why you are hiding under the table. You're hiding so I can't see what you're doing. But Jesus can see you. She's quiet for a moment, and then she says, how can Jesus see me? And I said, for Jesus, he can look through anything. Just like the window there. We look out the window. That's the way Jesus can look right through this table. He sees what you're doing. So you may be hiding from me, but you can't hide from Jesus. And she sat there for a few moments, and then this little voice squeaks up and says, I ain't hiding from Jesus. I'm hiding from you. Oh, there was my teachable moment, But good leaders are always looking for that. Look for those opportunities that you can take a problem and turn it into a lesson that is learned. For instance, in the book of Luke, the 9th chapter, there's an illustration where Jesus and his disciples are going through this Samaritan town, and the people don't receive him because he's a Jew. And so there's this cultural barrier, this difference, and his disciples got upset. And so James and John, they said, do you want us to call fire down from heaven and burn them up just like Elijah did? We love to use the Bible to prove our points. And Jesus turned around and he said, you don't know what spirit you are of. I did not come to destroy men's lives. I came to save men. And then he calls them, you are the sons of thunder. Now, by calling them the sons of thunder, what's he doing? That was not a compliment. No. He is gently chiding them for their bad tempers. He's saying, you're acting the wrong way. He turns it into a teachable moment. Now, when you're dealing with sons of thunder, there's only one way you can deal with this type of person. And a person that is very emotionally explosive like that, you've got to keep quiet, keep calm, keep cool. Don't raise your voice. Speak to them with strong, quiet authority. Otherwise, you escalate it into a shouting match. Don't make that mistake. Jesus was able to correct them so well, though, that when you come to the book of 1 John, which was written by one of these sons of thunder, he has so corrected John that John has become known as the apostle of love. The passion, the fire that he had, that wanting to burn people up, Jesus is able to correct him to the point where he is now known as the apostle of love. In fact, the word command, that's one of the meanings of the word to command. It simply means to arrange it in an orderly manner, to put it in the proper place. And so this is what Jesus did. A good person will tolerate the weaknesses of another, but a good leader will transform that person by the power of their influence. Let me give you the third word. The third word that I see that Jesus used is the word comfort. That's very important. He not only confronted, not only corrected, but he comforted them. In the book of 2 Timothy, the 4th chapter and verse 2, he talks about how that we should correct and how that we should discipline. But then he ends up, he says, with all patience. What's he talking about? He's talking about comfort. See, it's not enough to confront and correct someone. Our job is not finished until we have encouraged them. In fact, correction and confrontation can leave team members feeling discouraged. I'm a failure. I'll never be a good leader. And the devil, just heaps condemnation upon them. So your job is not complete until you have encouraged them. The devil will try to use this discouragement like a wedge to divide us, to separate the team, to divide the church, to divide the ministry. Don't let that happen. And the way you do that is through encouragement. For instance, in the life of Peter, the life of Peter, Jesus looked at him one day and he said, and he calls him Simon, which simply meant a reed, like a blade of grass blowing in the wind. He says, Simon, I'm going to make you into Peter, which the word Peter literally meant a rock. Now notice what he is doing with him. As good leaders always look for these moments of encouragement. That's what Jesus is doing with Peter. Peter, who's, his personality just vacillates from one thing to another and back and forth. And Jesus is saying, I'm going to turn you into a rock. He's changing the way that Peter thinks about himself. Before Peter can be trained to be the apostle, the strong leader, he's got to change the mental picture that he has of himself. Let me give you another illustration of this. In the book of 1 Timothy, the first chapter, Paul is writing and he says, God has not given us a spirit of fear. He's writing that to a young, timid preacher by the name of Timothy. Timothy obviously struggled with fear. And Paul is encouraging him. Another verse where Timothy is addressed, it's in 2 Timothy 2:1, where Paul says to him, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Jesus Christ. Now, what's he doing? He is encouraging him. He understood that Timothy needed some words of encouragement. I've discovered it's one of the most important things that we can do as leaders. We must always be encouraging people. Encourage them when they do good. Encourage them when they do bad. Make the correction, but then encourage them. Look for every opportunity that you possibly can for encouraging the people that follow you, because they're going to deal with this. When we confront them, when we correct them, it leaves them very vulnerable. So our job is not finished, it's not complete until we have encouraged or comforted them. Find ways that you can build them up. Find ways that you can make them feel good about themselves again. Jesus was a master at doing this, and he was continually doing it. Just because he confronted them and corrected them, he doesn't stop there, and we must not either. We must find ways to encourage the people that are around us. It's one of the things that I try to do continually now as I've aged and I have a little more wisdom than I did when I was younger, as I realize that people are just people. And they get easily wounded, they get easily offended, they get easily hurt and discouraged. So good leaders are always alert for those that will try to divide and conquer. And there's many people that do this. That's the way they get their way, is they're always looking for an opportunity to try to cut somebody off from the group. Don't allow that to happen. Continually be looking for ways to draw them in and bring them closer to you. And one of the ways of doing that, of course, is with encouragement. So this is the way that Jesus dealt with discipline. And it's very important, particularly in our culture today, when we see so many people that are out of control. They are undisciplined, and there's just such a violent anger and atmosphere of that. We must be people of peace. We must be willing to confront, but do it in the right way. You don't make it worse. Someone has said concerning leadership that anytime there's a problem, it's like a fire that's in front of you, and you have two containers that you carry in your hands. One of them is a container of water, and the other one is a container of gasoline. You make the choice. Am I going to make this a bigger problem, or am I going to resolve this and turn this into something good? Good leaders do that. Good leaders take negative situations and turn them into positive results. They turn defeats and losses into wins, into victories. That's good leadership. That's what Jesus is teaching us. And so I challenge you, learn from his example. Follow his example, and it will cause you to become a better leader, a better person in whatever position of leadership that God has given to you. May God help you in your journey with Jesus Christ to become a better leader by disciplining in a proper way.